It's back. Yes. Welcome back, YouTubers. Well, looks like we're gonna give this thing round two today. We're gonna go at this snowstorm here again and start cleaning this out. So anyways, we're gonna get at it. For those of you who are probably wondering or have a bunch of questions from the first video that I posted about this thing, it's got a 453N Detroit, which is it's a non-add-on turbo. It's not the Silver Series. It's not a 6V53. It's just a straight-up good old 453. The reason it's straight pipe is because it had a crappy. Somebody had made like a whole special frame on here, and they had a semi-truck muffler on here trying to keep the noise down, which didn't really do much good. And other than it looked ugly as sin, and so anyways, and all it was doing was choking back the engine and making it run hot. So yeah, that's why it's set up the way it's set up. So anyways, we're going to get on with this. This old girl, I think, was at one time, came from factory with a grapple, and I'm kind of sorry that they did take it off. I wish it was a grapple skidder. They converted it back over, I believe, to obviously to a cable skidder. Clark Allied 400 series hydro spool winch on it, so these are actually very, very desirable winches if you're going to have a cable skidder. So it's not the crappy old Gear-O-Matic style winches that a lot of these Timberjacks had. Some of you can say that they were great and all that, but dealing with those adjustable clutch brake bands and stuff, if you start having problems with them, you know how temperamental they can be. So if you've got a machine with a Clark winch on it, you've got a pretty good setup. So ask anybody that's run one, they'll tell you. Okay, anyways, as far as the transmission goes on this thing, oh god, this thing's hard to get on off of. It is not a, all of these series of machines, this is not a side ride or a offset like the 200 series, the 300 series, and the 400 series Timberjacks from old to newer were all center ride machines, which meaning is you're in line with, when you're in the seat, you're in line with the center of the machine, not sitting off to the side like on the old 230s, 240s, and they were great machines too, but these were a center ride. That's what makes them so high off the ground, and yes, makes them, as a cable machine, they're not the greatest when you got to jump up and down when you're tying loads and untying loads. So this is an early, like I say, this is an early version of the 450. What we used to call around here the old flat hoods, which means it doesn't have it's not the black hood or the tapered hood special like on the, like a 450B or 380B. I think the frame or the chassis on these was pretty much the same as the 380s, other than the 450s had the heavy-duty Eaton posi lock front and rear diffs, and this one somebody had added the blade extensions to it, so that's what makes it a good dozer machine. I don't use this thing for pulling much wood in the bush. It's mostly primarily gets used for well, clearing snow, opening roads, opening landings, that kind of stuff. So it's a great blade machine. It's got good blade control. That's why I use it as much as I do when I got to do a bunch of heavy snow clearing and, well, any kind of whatchamacallit, even fence line opening and stuff like that. That's why I primarily bought it. Like I say, I would have preferred it being a grapple machine, but seeing that it's a cable machine, well, it gets used plenty anyways, and for other purposes, mostly as a dozer. So it's fast, it's quick on its heels, so to speak, and it does a good job. So anyways, like I don't know if how many of you remember in the last video I was talking about hearing protection. Yeah, these, anytime you're playing with Detroits, you need good hearing protection. I have these, like I say, for years and years I've always used the Peltor hearing protection. It's just my personal preference. You guys can use whatever you want or what you like. Like I say, these are the Optimum 98s. They're not the best for, well, they don't have the decibel rating for what this machine puts out, basically. That I think is 98 is supposed to be something like the maximum decibel rating they reduce noise by 25 decibels, which on, on these machines it doesn't really cut the mustard. So when I'm using these, I usually have a set of earplugs underneath as well. Then I run these. I know the pelters come, like I say, and these. This is a like their baseline, and I do like them. They're great for if you're doing small engine stuff like lawnmowers, garden tractors, tillers. You know, anything with. Well, it's just not as noisy as this, but anything that can damage your hearing. These are light. They're comfortable. I've used them for years. I like them. If you're going to play around with these, like I say, with these loudmouth Detroits, you pretty much got to have something like a 101 or a 105, or now Pelter is making, or 3M is making their different series. They're like their 5X and 4X series hearing protection. They also have kind of what I think they call their Pro series, which I picked up a pair of these the other day, the 3M Pro grades. They're actually have the same decibel rating as the Optimum 105s. They have a little bit different of a headband on them, as in they've got a vented headband instead of the solid top headband like those. So they're a lot more comfortable, or supposedly more comfortable. I don't know. They are fairly heavy, but obviously they have to be to. They give you a full. These are supposed to be a full 30 decibel noise reduction rating. So this is pretty much what you need if you're going to be playing around with, like I say, these Detroit powered, anything Detroit powered. If you're going to be playing around with it, I don't care if you got a good muffler on it or not. Just the sheer noise that comes out of the engine. The engine block itself on a Detroit is, unless you've been around one, the guys that have been around them, or people like us that run them, we know what they're about. Anybody that's watching on video, or you've seen somebody go by with one, or hear one working off in the distance, it's I don't know how to explain it. The sheer noise that comes out of these things literally resonates through your body, like you can feel it through your chest. That's how. When they're up to speed and they're running, they're a 2-stroke diesel, which means they fire at twice the rate of any other regular diesel. So that's why they're produced. They sound like they're revving to the moon, when actually they do rev over 2,000 RPM, but that's, in comparison to a lot of things, it's not horribly which one. It's just because of because like I say, they fire at instead of 4 revolutions per combustion stroke, they make 2. So basically, technically, they make, twice the amount of racket. So, they're great little motors for what they are. A lot of people hate on them because they always said they're the most efficient motor at turning diesel fuel into noise. And I guess you could say, yeah, they do. But they also are actually surprisingly efficient. This thing, considering for how heavy a machine it's moving, and only, when you look at the amount of cubic inches of displacement this thing has, it's not, for a little 453, it's not a whole lot of, not a whole lot of displacement, and it does put out a surprisingly amount of horsepower. Now, some of you that are probably going to comment and say that I'm over revving it, or don't need to scream this thing as hard as I do. The reason being, I'm not trying to abuse this thing, or showing off or anything like that. I pretty much have no choice. I have to run on these machines. You have, if you're running an old Clark Skidder or a Timberjack, this is not a standard transmission. This is a full. This has even though it's a Timberjack, they use a lot of Timberjacks. The 200 series is specifically, the old side rides like I mentioned before. They use. They run a lot of standard transmissions. Some of them had power shifts in them, but probably 90% of them were. The older ones, anyways, are all 4-speed standards with a 2-speed transfer case, with your forward and reverse on your transfer case. This particular machine is not. All the 300, the 350s, 380s, 450s, 480s, every one that I've ever come across or I've ever seen, including this one, they are a full power shift, and they have a torque converter. On the back of the motor, powering the transmission. Now, they're a semi-automatic transmission. So, they had 3-speed and 4-speeds Clark transmissions. This is the 3-speed version. So you have forward reverse on one stick, and you've got your 1, 2, 3, so you can go forward and back up and go forward in second gear, third gear, first gear, whatever. But they are automatic, and you have no choice. You have to, even though they're a power shift, you have to let off the throttle to shift. They're not shift under load. When you're throttled up or powered up, technically the transmission or the torque converter is locked up in them. They're pulling. But you can't idle these things around. You can't fart around. And Detroits do not like to be idled. Anybody that's owned Detroits, you know that. Any of you that don't and wonder why guys run them, you know, balls to the wall, there's a reason for it. Is Detroits, if you idle them or lug them, they start to spit oil and they slobber all over themselves, and you will literally screw them up faster by lugging them or running them at a low RPM than if you are letting them scream. That's their nature. That's what they do. And then in this particular application, you really have no choice. You have to keep it planted, especially if you're going to make it work. You got to wind them up and let them sing, because the torque converter requires, it has to build a certain pressure, oil pressure in the transmission, and if you do not, you will burn the clutch packs up in short order in these. So there's a reason why I'm basically, you got them planted and they're screaming, because you want the torque converter to load up and pressure up the transmission, and then they lock up, and then you're trucking, you're going. The other day in the video, I just did a quick pan over at the gauges here. Engine oil pressure, of course. This motor is pretty healthy. When I got the machine a number of years back, somebody had been in it not long before, so they had probably did, I don't know, a full rebuild, I'm thinking, because it had new gaskets wherever you look, kind of peeking out around the edges of the castings of the block, and there was new bolts in places, so you knew that somebody had been in it, and obviously they did a pretty good job, because it starts good even on a cold day if it's not plugged in. I don't mean real cold, but at the freezing mark, you hit the button and she fires off. Most of these, if they're, you know, at the end of their rope or they're getting tired, you got to guys pump a bunch of ether in them to get them going. And this one you do not. She fires up pretty short order. Of course, you have your simple just amperage gauge, oil pressure gauge. Like I say, on this one you fire it up, it's in the 55 to 60 cold. Most of these I think are supposed to run in the 7 to 10 pound range at idle, and that's about where it's at, around 10 pounds when it's idling warm or hot temperature. Working under load, 45 in the 50 range, so that's pretty good oil pressure for Detroit. No, it doesn't spit it out. Like I say, they're an odd animal, these things. They hold their oil. You have to have the engine revved up to keep what they call crankcase pressure. That's why they have like a whipple blower on the side of them, is to keep that air pressure in the crankcase, to keep the oil down in the pan. It sounds weird, but that's how they work. Of course, the simple water temperature. Even working like I was the other day where she was smoking black, that's just for little short runs when I'm doing that. You can't do that constantly with them. The transmission wouldn't allow it, and, well, the engine wouldn't either. These things are made for short bursts of, you know, a Detroit is ideal in a skidder application, because when you pick up a load of wood, it's a short run from the bush into your landing. So it's just a matter of a few minutes and you're at the landing, and then you're idling, and then they have a chance to, you know, cycle down, and then you take off and rip roar back in the bush, pick up another load, and you rip back to the landing again. So it's just short bursts. The same thing when I'm doing dozing here, like cleaning, cleaning snow or opening landings or bush roads. You're going back and forth, so they're cycling constantly. So water temperature on this one never gets over about 170, 180 if you're really pushing it hard, but 170 is always in the range it runs at, so it's definitely in the safe zone. And I mean, the other gauge here, if you guys were wondering, that's transmission pressure. That's not engine temperature if you were figuring, because it was running like at 250. No, that's transmission oil pressure. On these at idle, they're supposed to be around 225 to 250, 260, and then when you load them up or when they're ripping, she's close to 300. They're supposed to be somewhere in that 250 to 300 range, and it's like 275, 290, somewhere in there. So that's normal range for that. And the other whatever there at the end, that's the transmission temperature gauge, and it comes up a little bit, but I don't run long runs enough to really get the temps. You know, I'm not cooking the transmission by any means. So anyways, there you go. A long-winded explanation again, but we're gonna get this girl fired up, and if we can here, and like I say, I gotta push out my bale yard once more, get the snow off there before, because it's now gonna start melting here in the next few days. Today already there's water puddles here and there, so gotta get it opened up and so things can start drying off. But anyways, without further ado here, we're gonna get this thing cranked up. So once again, and if you were wondering why I, like at the last video too, I showed making sure my throttle pedal was free and the fuel cut off. Detroits, if anybody's ever run them, you know you have to make sure that your fuel rail or your throttle rack is not stuck, not sticking, because these are notorious, especially if you let them sit for a while, they get gummed up. You got to run them semi-regular. It's good to, even when you're not using them in the off season, just start them up and run them for a few minutes. Back up, go ahead a few times, let them rip, clear them out, and that's the life of a Detroit. They like to be run. If they sit any length of time, they can get, like I say, and even a mechanical obstruction. If you're not sure, you can you can get a runaway on these very easily if you're not careful. So this one has never given me issue yet. I mean, it can happen to anybody at some point. I do have an air shutoff valve here, which is a mechanical pull cable that goes to the air box, and they actually have a flapper in there that if you get a runaway and you can close the air intake. Well, it's an air intake shutoff. Essentially, it just about kills the engine off, and it gives you a chance to smother it out or shut it down before anything gets out of hand. But that's worst case scenario. But anyways, and if any of you are running these and you're wondering, guys argue about what grade of oil and stuff to run in an old Detroit, well, I can tell you, run straight grade oil. Good old-fashioned 30 weight or 40 weight. I have straight 30 weight oil in here because it's a little bit of a mixed climate temperatures that I run. Some winter, when it's real cold, I don't start it. They recommend to run like 10 weight oil if it's minus 20 or something and colder. Well, when it's that temperature, I don't start this thing. It's an open platform machine, and you literally freeze on here, so it's not fun. So 30 weight oil up to whatever 70 some degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius plus 25. That's fine. You can run 30 weight oil all day long in these things, and that's what they recommend. That's what Detroit recommended, and still to this day, the company that bought just before GM sold the patent rights to these two-stroke diesels, they had put a service bulletin out telling people to not run multi-grade oils like your 1540 or any combination of. These motors do not like multi-grade oils. They do not like detergent oil. You can't. Guys say, "Oh, I run it. It's blah blah blah. It's fine." Or you get away with it for a while, but overall, the service life on a two-stroke Detroit, you cannot run multi-grade oil. It was not recommended by Detroit. Even the company that bought the patent rights from General Motors for the two-stroke Detroits, it's a European company. I forget. I think it's MDI or MDI. I can't remember exactly. I think it's a German-based company. They bought the patent rights for the two-stroke Detroit diesels, and they actually are still manufacturing these engines to this day for off-road applications around the world. Not here in North America, but in marine applications for boat generators in third world countries. They're still making these engines brand new. They redesigned the cylinder heads a little bit. They actually meet European emission standards as far as I know, or what I've read on their websites. So, and they put a service bulletin out, I believe, like literally just 2 years ago in 2020 or 2021, just at the beginning of the pandemic or just before, 2019 to 2021, somewhere in there. In the last few years, they've actually put a new service bulletin out. And they still, to this day, not just for what they call their takeover, what they call the vintage or classic Detroit two-strokes, and even the new Detroit two-strokes that they're building, I believe, they recommend to not run multi-grade detergent oils in these engines. They tell you specifically to run 30 weight in a certain temperature range, and if it's in real hot tropical weather, or in anybody, say you guys down in Texas or Florida or California, well, I guess California, maybe you won't be able to run these things much longer if they haven't been banned already. But anywhere's in warm climates where you get hot temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, then they recommend to run something like a straight 40 weight oil. There's lots of good brands out there. I'm just going to throw one out there as an example. What I use is like the old standby Shell Rotella T1 series oil. It's a straight grade. I mean, there's, like I say, Chevron Mobile and plenty of other companies, you know, still make 30 weight oil. It's not the easiest to find. If you go to your local oil distributor, you'll have to sometimes get them to order in a pail or two for you. For these older ones, guys look at you kind of weird and say, well, why don't you just run straight, 1540 like everybody else? Well, like I say, they are not recommended to be running these old girls. So that's what I run in it. So anyways, like I say, I've been blabbering on way too long here, so let's get started here. We'll get her fired up, and once again, like I say, we'll battery switch. Everything is free and clear. And yeah, I guess we're gonna try out the new ear muffs and see how I like them, and time to make some noise again. folks, thanks for stopping in today and checking out the video. As always, I appreciate you popping by, see what I'm up to. Me and the old screaming demon here have made enough noise for one day, so time to call it quits. So anyways, if you like today's video, like, thumbs up, subscribe. I appreciate all your support. Till the next time, take care. Uh-oh, I hear sirens coming again.